Hello everyone and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today I'm joined by my fellow penis collector, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Driveway Dolls, the new movie from Ethan Coen, and co-written, I believe, by his wife, Tricia Cooke, and starring Geraldine Viswanathan and Margaret Qualley and a host of other little guys and some funny roles. Tanner, we've been looking forward to this movie.
Yeah.
We're some Coen Brothers fans.
We are, indeed, we are.
I've never seen one of their movies in theaters. Never in my life, Tanner.
I guess I haven't either, yeah.
I saw one of their movies in theaters because this is a solo directorial effort from
They've
Ethan
split,
Coen.
yes.
Yeah, they parted ways. Still brothers, though. But Tanner, you and I saw this movie.
We did.
And I would dare to say we enjoyed it. How do you feel?
I also quite enjoyed this film. I would dare to say, Tucker, that I agree with that statement. Driveway Dolls is a lot of fun. We were sort of in hot anticipation of finally a good 2024 movie.
Yes.
It finally arrived.
Yeah.
From the hand and the pen, I suppose, of a very storied, very celebrated filmmaker in Ethan Coen. And while it's not the same as a lot of Coen Brothers movies, it doesn't lack maybe the dark complexity or the depth of a lot of the two of their work.
Mm-hmm.
It's equally as fun.
Sure.
I think you kind of get a sense of who brings what to the table in Joel and Ethan's things.
Yeah. The context being that Joel Coen directed The Tragedy of Macbeth.
Yeah, which is a very straightforward, sort of sorrowful, no jokes sort of adaptation of adaptation of Shakespeare. And this is a fun crime comedy thriller about dicks and lesbians.
Yeah, and it is all the better for it. I think that the light and zany tone this film takes feels very, very fresh. I mean, we've seen a couple of indie comedies over the last couple of years that we really enjoyed. Movies like Bottoms and Bros that do take this really hands-off, try anything comedy approach. But Driveway Dolls, coming from a storied director and having Ethan Coen be someone that people respect and can get amazing actors in small bit parts, it makes us feel totally fresh for a theatrical experience. And best movie of 2024 so far.
Mm-hmm.
We're 7 weeks into the year.
We did it.
It has no competition, frankly, because everything else has been the dregs of the studio system that has got pushed out, and it was we need to fill something in these gaps.
This also got pushed out. This was supposed to come out in September, but I think it plays a lot better as a sort of Valentine's Day adjacent February thing. Yeah. But anyway, Tucker, let's talk about the movie itself.
Yes.
Let's start with our main two, the Driveway Dolls themselves.
Oh yeah, the titular dolls.
Margaret Qualley and Geraldine Viswanathan.
Yes.
Who play sort of a classic comedic archetype duo of the very loose, very freewheeling Southerner, I guess, in Margaret Qualley's... What's her character's name?
Their characters are Jamie and Marion.
Marion, that's right.
Marlon. I read the I as an L, and I'm like, that's Geraldine Viswanathan, Marlon.
And Geraldine is the very uptight, very, straight and narrow sort of character both of them are on a journey to Tallahassee.
Yeah. One of them has a stick up their ass, and one of them wants a stick up her ass.
Oh, very good. Very, very good.
And their dynamic is what makes this movie work. I think they have incredible comedic chemistry in leaning so far into their archetypes, and I think that is both the biggest... one of the only weaknesses with this film and the biggest strength of this film. Because I do believe that starting the film and having them be so different was a little bit off-putting. I'm like, I don't know if I buy these people as friends.
I wanted to get to this.
That is only an issue for the first 15, 20 minutes of the film, because I do think that as soon as you hit the road trip and they're going on adventures and they're talking a little bit more, they start to meet each other in the middle a little bit more. They both start to grow and learn a little bit about each other. And by the end of the film, when, spoilers there, and they have romance with each other, it feels very believable. Their chemistry is there, and then they're taking bits and elements from each other and understanding each other better by the end of the film. But I do feel like there was maybe a 10-minute setup scene that was missing of what is their history together? How do they know each other? How good of friends are they? Because I don't know if I really bought them as best, maybe they weren't best friends, but friends that would go on a road trip with each other at the beginning of this film.
Tucker,
That's the only flaw I have.
I love it when we have parallel thought here, because I was thinking the exact same thing. I think this movie and their dynamic would have played a lot better if the setup was not that they know each other and they're friends. It's that they're two strangers who, by some happenstance, have to go on a road trip
or
together.
They're co-workers,
or something.
I think them knowing each other is good, because I think the way that they talk about their history and the way that they know past relationships and stuff definitely plays into as we learn more about that, the believability of their dynamic, saying like, "Oh, remember that old girlfriend you had?
You haven't had sex since Donna and stuff like that." Like that's all good. But I think generally, I think we're missing just a little bit of setup there. Yes. That this film, I think, sort of lacks because it is like 80 minutes long or something crazy.
84 minutes, yeah.
It's a very tight, very quick sort of narrative, and I think that certainly helps it feel light on its feet when it's presenting itself to you. But yeah, I kind of feel what you're saying too, Tucker, about the dynamic being a sort of strength and weakness.
Yeah.
Because I do like their chemistry.
Oh,
I think they play very well together. But ultimately, I don't feel. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of comparisons to Bottoms around this film and maybe in this review as well, though if you want to stray away from it, I understand that. I don't feel the same level of chemistry as I do with Debris and Sennett there. Yeah. Because Geraldine and Margaret are so
different.
So locked into their character archetypes that I don't feel like, okay, I feel like the writers put forward these two archetypes, these two characters to play off of each other, as opposed to letting the actors really explore the space a little bit.
Yeah, but I do think that to the movie's credit, and as I want to transition to the positives of their dynamic and their performances, that loosens significantly over the course of the runtime.
I would agree.
And again, by the end of the film, watching them blossom into a sort of an unlikely romance and be put into crazier and crazier situations, but being more confident with each other and knowing each other a little bit better, I completely bought that.
Yeah.
And it makes for an amazing pairing. And knowing where they end up, I only, in retrospect, consider that a flaw, but I do think that it doesn't really matter in the long term, because I'm not going to remember, there was a little bit of uncomfortableness at the beginning. I'm going to remember they're fucking firing back and forth these quips, and they're in these awkward scenarios where their personalities are playing off of each other very well, and both of them are turning in amazing, very different but equally amazing performances. And it's their chemistry that makes this film work. It's just, I think the writing and the pacing that don't quite allow that to breathe at the very beginning of the film.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah. So Margaret Qualley is Jamie. Thank you. And she is basically channeling like Jim Carrey is what I would say she's most akin to. She's sort of like she's flailing her arms about. She's leaning back like this to really drive home the whole like laid back. I've had sex with a bunch of people. I'm not stressed by any situation whatsoever. Because I'll always find my way out of it.
Yeah.
And she plays that very, very well. She's very charismatic doing that, doing this whole thing of like, we should hit this place on the map, the world's largest Dixie cup. Yeah. And she's really leaning into this like Southern accent.
The accent is crazy.
And like even the costume design for her character conveys all this. It's a very clear message they're trying to send with this character. Same goes for Geraldine Viswanathan's character as well. Yeah. Just like the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Yeah. And she really hits like the deadpan notes, I don't think that's funny at all. I think we should be sticking to the plan. Yeah. Like that.
Using big words a lot. Always going to the corner and reading her book. And I do like how different they are, because it allows you to get both these personalities that do meet in the middle occasionally, but are usually so polar opposite that you're dropped into a crazy scenario. Because one thing that the Coens are very much known for, and I think this movie excels at, is creating very distinct scenarios with wacky side characters that you can plop your main characters into and see how their personalities bounce off of whatever situation they happen to be rammed into.
Yeah.
And I think that is where the strengths of this movie lie, in its pacing and in the side characters and the road trip nature. That means we're stopping at different areas and we're always moving forward. I really found the pacing and the writing and the variety of all these situations that are put into really, really, really fantastic and fresh.
Yeah.
Are there any scenarios, any side characters, any scenes that stick out to you?
We should talk about the sort of the driving force of this narrative, which is the pursuit. They have stolen a mysterious briefcase that we don't know what's inside of it for a lot of this film before it is ultimately revealed that, I guess, spoilers for Driveway Dolls?
Yeah.
Spoiler for Driveway Dolls, it's full of dildos.
Yes.
Dildos made are plastered from the penises of real and somewhat important people, including a senator character played by Matt Damon.
Yeah. Played very briefly by Matt Damon.
Exactly.
We'll get into that.
He pops up in like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
And then they're being pursued by some very classic Coen characters. These two sort of, I don't know what you'd call them, goons, I suppose.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, just two guys who work for Coleman Domingo, who are really just like, we got to get the briefcase. We're on the trail. We're getting misled by these people. We're following them though. they are a lot of fun as well.
Oh,
so you kind of have these two pairings that work ultimately very well in the road trip setting. They give me a lot of my favorite lines from the film, a lot of my favorite interactions, frankly. The two that I singled out walking out of the theater were, and they also have the big guy, skinny guy sort of like cartoon dynamic, where one of them is like the brute and one of them is like the smooth talker.
Yeah.
And the
talkative, clever one.
The talkative, clever one is like something about slamming hams on the veranda and you're tugging your measly pud and stuff like that. Like it's these really, really clever lines that are just like huge pops in the theater for laughs.
And that is frankly most of the movie.
Yeah.
It's always moving on. We're always moving on different scenes, but the constant force is not only the core set of performances, but the writing never misses a beat.
Yeah.
I think that even in those earlier scenes where I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if the chemistry's working, the lines are still hilarious. And the situations that the characters are put into are hilarious. And I think that the combination of that really witty, clever dialogue from both Ethan Coen and Tricia Cooke, combined with the delivery of the performances and the comedic timing, also with the editing, which I think is something we need to talk about.
Absolutely.
Really hammers home. This is a comedy. There's no... The characters are saying lines that are ridiculous and stupid and feel like they are tightly honed to just get a quip out of you and make you giggle. And I was giggling.
Absolutely. We were hooting and hollering the whole time. So it is really like a laugh per minute kind of movie. Chuck, you want to talk about
approximately 84 laughs there, by my count?
Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but once you're in the moment, that's a lot. Let's talk about the editing a little bit, because this is something that really struck me as well. So obviously, and this isn't really present in the trailer because it can always be sort of like set dressing for the trailer itself. These scene transitions are oftentimes drawing attention to themselves because there's like screeching sound effects as frames like pop in from the side or they'll drop down like this.
There's one that like folds open like a map.
Exactly. So that editing style I think serves itself to A, stand out, B, sort of convey that we're moving to a different character or a different place entirely. Yeah. And C, really helps with the quick pace of this film as well.
And the wacky tone because no one's doing that. No one's doing a theatrical release film from a storied director who has many awards, nominations, and wins under his belt. I think it is one of this movie's biggest strengths that it feels so loose and experimental and ridiculous, but it is made with the quality of a bunch of storied actors and writers and directors and editors and it was just so much fun to see a big name director playing with cinema like this in a way that not even the other Coen Brothers movies really have done. I mean, they have wacky writing, wacky performances, but the editing is almost never. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a movie use these transitions before.
Because it is really, really drawing attention to itself at the end of the day.
It's very much what I would have done in iMovie when I was 10. But I mean that in the best possible way, in that is an editing style. And no one is using that as their editing style, especially in a feature film. And it feels very, very bold.
Yeah. And also, we are sort of given these sequences that even though the film is set in 1999, we sort of harken back to like 70s flower power, very groovy sort of interstitial sequences that are like largely just imagery and colors and music that given to you, but ultimately feed into this thing of when Matt Damon's penis was casted into a dildo, it was back in the 70s by a character portrayed by Miley Cyrus, and like we do get that sequence where he's wearing a headband and a bad wig, and he's like, whoa, this is groovy. Like, it's just a moment for Matt Damon to be silly, and it sort of pays off what those sequences. Could we get a handful of, like, 2 or 3 of them before that payoff itself?
Yeah, I think that's the element of this movie I like the editing, like, respect the most, because it is so bold, but I don't really think it did anything for me in terms of the experience. It is very, very, very random. It is. And sometimes it comes at, like, inopportune times where I'm, like, enjoying the pacing of the sequence. And there's, like, a 90-second, like, screensaver section with, like, you know, lava lamp bubble effects. I'm like, huh? Like, what are the characters doing? Yes. And that's really just me being, like, narrative film brained. I'm not really an experimental cinema guy. I'm not really like just pure visuals don't really stimulate me in the same way. And so, but I'm very glad they're in there because again, it is a point to the looseness and experimentality of this movie, which I think is its biggest strength and what makes it stand out. Even from the other comedies that we've mentioned, things like Bottoms and Bros, those movies are, in being studio comedies, they are straight-laced in their editing, and they don't really take this like, whoa, what's going on, man?
Yeah, exactly. And Tucker, thank you for bringing up the how it sort of pulls you out of it a little bit, because I felt that even with some of the non-flower power sort of sequences, some of the editing of this film, I feel, undercuts the movement of it a little bit. As much as I said,
do you have a specific moment?
I don't know. I think there are just a couple sequences where obviously there are multiple plot lines going on at the same time that can confuse the timeline of the film. It was like, when did Coleman Domingo and his goons sort of show up at Curly's? And when did they set out? And we can oftentimes interrupt a scene that I feel like hasn't stopped in a satisfying place yet to jump somewhere else. It happens maybe 4 or 5 times in the film. And I was like, I dig what you're doing with the editing here.
And trying to keep it fast.
But I just show me a little bit more of that scene. Because when we come back to it, I'm like, okay, that would have been a good place to edit, to stop that. Just drop it in, just shuffle it around a little bit more.
And it makes me wonder why this movie wasn't, dare I say, 93 minutes or something, where it's just
something like crazy.
You tack on an extra 45 seconds at the end of those scenes that feel like they're cut a little bit too soon, and no one's going to say, wow, this movie's too long. But yeah, I don't know. I do agree with you, and it just mostly like makes me wonder like why they felt it needed to be this short. Because it still would have been fast and short if it was just over 90 minutes, which very, very, very few theatrically released movies, especially not like animated ones, hit these days. Like, this is one of the shortest movies I've seen in theaters in a long time, and it's certainly better for it, but it also still would have been that if it was just 5 or 6 minutes longer, and it would have had the same like, oh, I feel like we like tripped over the ending of this sequence. But again, let's get back to the variety and one of the biggest strengths of this film, which is side characters. There are a lot of funny, memorable side characters in this movie, which is one of my favorite staples in Coen Brothers movies. It's just the one weird guy in that one sequence that has a big mustache or, you know, drives a weird car or whatever. This movie has that in spades. And let me just read through some of the side characters that appear either briefly or in mild supporting roles. Beanie Feldstein as an over-aggressive cop who is Margaret Qualley's ex. Coleman Domingo as a sort of mob boss guy who's frankly, he's just doing a Coleman Domingo performance where he's he's talking smooth with the microphone.
Now listen to me right here.
But he does get a couple chances to like really ham it up, especially near the end. Pedro Pascal in an opening sequence where he gets murdered, who's leaning into one of Pedro Pascal's like I think underplayed strengths, which is just being like totally like wacky, like wide-eyed, bug-eyed guy, which we saw a little bit of in not one of his best movies, but one of my favorite roles of his, which is Wonder Woman 1984. In which he's just going like, whoa, dude.
Well, that you know, because Pedro Pascal has a couple of different moods where he can be the charismatic guy, he can be the gruff, silent type, and now we're exploring a little bit more of his like comedic stylings, I think. I enjoyed him, and he's obviously only in that opening scene technically because we do see a replica of his head a couple of times.
A very good replica.
Yeah, honestly.
It looks a lot like Pedro
Although
Pascal.
it could have been like, because we always see it in close-up, so I'm like, are they just putting his head through like a box on a table or something? I don't know.
There's also Bill Camp as Curly. It was really, really funny in one of the most monotone, like deadpan roles I've seen. His voice is so deep, you almost like wonder if you're hearing it right.
Won't somebody help Curly?
He's really, really funny. And he plays off of the other roles very nicely. We mentioned the two sort of goon guys, Joey Slotnick and C.J. Wilson, who are both really, really funny.
Absolutely.
Miley Cyrus shows up in this movie, and then also Matt Damon. In a small role, but very fun for him to be able to take a small role for probably not very much money in a movie like this, just because he knows it'll be fun to help his friend's movie be better.
And from my recollection, never been in a Coen Bros movie. So
is it true?
I don't think so.
I'll take a quick look there, but
not that I recall. But anyway, so one thing I did want to address, and Tucker, you touched on it a little bit, just as we close out here, is the romantic and
he was in True Grit.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that movie. is the romantic and sexual nature of this film
sure.
as well, because there is a lot of it, as there is conversations about it in many of the films that we've sort of compared this to, these queer comedies as of late, like Bros and Bottoms. And this one, the sex isn't really played as much for a joke, actually. Well, the very opening scene with Margaret Qualley is, but there's actually a very, like, just hanging on it, showing you these two characters having an intimate moment between Jamie and Marion. Thank you. Marlon. And I was expecting a joke or an interruption there. And I was like, oh, we're just kind of like showing these characters having the payoff to their sort of awkward friends to lovers things, I would say.
I think that the romance element of this movie is handled like with surprising deftness. It is a queer comedy from a straight guy director that to me feels like it was a lost new queer cinema movie. Like if this movie had come out in like 95,
I get you.
Like in the era where we're getting things in new queer cinema, people would have been like, "Oh, this is a fucking classic." Alongside those,
because you said that a couple of times, and I never really understood what you meant until you
because it has an experimental nature, and because I think it does this really interesting sort of like straightforward, but also like largely steering away from homophobia as like the source of either tension or jokes. Almost none of the even like villain characters in this movie are like mad or
gay
upset.
Bashing,
there isn't a lot. Like the only gay bashing that is in this movie is them like slinging like oh you dumb lesbian things at each other. But also I think that in me saying it was handled very deftly in the romantic moments, I agree. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop when they were having these like slow romantic sequences where there's soft music playing and the editing is much slower, and I'm like, someone's gonna come busting through that door. Something's gonna happen. A phone's gonna ring. That I mean, that maybe that's established from the beginning scene, but it doesn't happen, and it makes it feel very, very genuine. And, and I'm honestly, like, I'm like, this is like really well done and very believable, and like you're not ripping me out of this moment. And I think it, again, helps to cement, I think, the great dynamic between these characters as they sort of blossom a romance. Not playing those moments for jokes makes me care about their chemistry so much more, because it's like I feel like the director and the editor and the writing cares about our characters having a genuine relationship that I think is paid off very well by the end.
I mean, obviously there are some jokes to be found in it. There's a moment, where they're sort of having sex in the shower, and we get like a comedic like grabbing the dildo off the counter and it bloop, as it like the suction comes off of it. But that first sequence where they sort of like finally break the tension and have sex with each other is that what we were talking about. But and the other sequences as well have comedic elements to them that are very funny, like the soccer team basement kissing party,
that's such a good payoff.
It's a slow drifting across like probably like half a dozen couples making out, and then we get to the team captain who blows her whistle and says, "Switch!"
Switch right. And that's, I think, again, the comedy of this movie I think is fantastic. This is one of my favorite comedies in recent times. And it is the fact that this movie can do both. It is not playing all of its sex and queer comedy moments or queer relationship moments for comedy, but it is using a lot of them for comedy. And there's a lot of sex jokes in this movie, and there's a lot of dildo jokes in this movie. They're just these great moments of being very blunt but also clever with your sex comedy stuff, like when Beanie Feldstein's trying to remove the dildo from the wall with a drill, and she's like crying.
I love that the action that Beanie Feldstein does in that moment is like she's not trying to line it up at all. She's just kind of like with the drill.
Then the sequence where they're at this fancy dinner and they're just talking about like,
I think we should have sex with each other.
Let's have sex, and this guy's like just pouring the champagne in the background, and he's like, "Thank you, sir." It's played straight, but it's straight for laughs, and I think it's so funny. And then another great moment coming just off the heels of that is talking about a dildo that someone had and how they would put it on like a belt sander or whatever. And I'm like, this, and these moments had me howling with laugh. Like genuinely, some of the hardest I've laughed in a long time, and contributes just to the tone of this movie. Like, just hitting me all the right places.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else we want to talk about with Drive-Away Dolls, Tucker? Did we hit all the notes here?
I think we did.
Okay. Tucker, I'm going to give Drive-Away Dolls a 7.5 out of 10.
7.5?
Great movie. Really enjoyed it. A lot of fun. But, it does have its, drawbacks a little bit. And, maybe I am holding this to a bit higher standard because it's coming from a Coen brother here. I don't know.
No, and I totally understand that. I think that a lot of people are going to see this as just like a simple raunchy comedy and be like, oh, Ethan Coen's like stooped to a new low or whatever. And this movie is actually getting surprisingly mixed reviews from what I've seen.
I think it's got like a 69% of Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, there's some people saying it's bad, and then a lot of people saying it's mid.
That at all.
But for me, the experience and the creativity and the freshness of Drive-Away Dolls, I think we'll keep it as one of my favorite movies of this year. I'm going to give it 9.2 out of 10. This is one of my favorite comedies that I can remember. I was laughing louder than, frankly, very few people in our theater, but louder than anyone else in the theater.
There was one guy other than our group of friends that went.
And it while there are these criticisms that I have of it, it is about that experience on the whole.
Absolutely. I get you. Yeah.
Laughs per minute and great line delivery and amazing performances and super clever editing and feeling so distinct for a theatrical experience. I absolutely adored this movie, and I really, really would love to rewatch it and write down my favorite lines and just be able to like remember these moments, going forward, because I really do think that this is a comedy that I will remember.
Absolutely.
And continue to reference and think about.
It really does just hit you right, I think, in the theater. So I say definitely go and see it if it is around you. I'm not sure what sort of release this is getting. It's
in like 2,700 theaters or something.
Right on. Yeah. It might be around you, so go catch it just to fill the space before Dune Part 2 comes in and sort of takes over the cinemas, I would say. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Put some flowers in here and some lava.
I don't know how to do that.
Sorry, I'm so used to you striking me in anger.
And then what's the other one?
Don't
hear no evil. Is that a thing?
See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil.
Hear no evil.
Is it hear no evil? Hear no evil is the weakest.
That sounds weird.
That's the weak link, I feel.
Why?
It says like see no evil.
It's like don't be convinced by evil. Like don't allow evil into your mind.
Speak no evil, banger, rager, awesome. See no evil, pretty solid. I dig that one.
What do you mean?
Just based on vibes.
Oh, I see.
Hear no evil? What the fuck are you talking about? Get out of my face.